I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network, and this is a breaking news alert. We are learning that a debt ceiling deal in principle has been negotiated between President Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy. Here's what we know as of now. The deal, which is still being finalized and written on Saturday night, would raise the borrowing limit, which is currently $31.4 trillion for 2 years, which would be enough to get past the next presidential cycle. The debt ceiling negotiation bill will allow for military and entitlement spending to increase. It will only cap discretionary spending at 2023 levels for 2 years, and the 2023 levels were successfully negotiated previously by President Biden. So that seems like a big win here. Let's get into more of the details, but the reaction by right-wingers, by MAGA Republicans, is incredibly angry at this deal, which tells you all you need to know. This is from a MAGA Republican journalist by the name of Greg Price, who writes, "Sources on Capitol Hill tell me the debt ceiling deal McCarthy negotiated with Biden includes no legitimate spending cuts or significant reforms in exchange for a $4 trillion debt ceiling increase. Just a freeze next year, followed by 1% increase in 2025, adjusted for inflation. Text of the bill will be released shortly, but this is total garbage considering the leverage the GOP conference had here. They're apparently calling it the, quote, Fiscal Responsibility Act, LMFAO. Not only does it not cut a single dollar, but the new debt ceiling deadline is also going to be January 1, 2025, which is the lame duck session when spending usually gets blown out." And then he goes on to post White House talking points and saying that the White House is celebrating that. I'll go talk about some of those in just a bit. And then, of course, Elon Musk on right-wing Twitter, he's the leader of right-wing Twitter, goes, "Really?" And then the guy's like, "Really, really?" So let's get into some of the nooks and crannies here. I think probably the most frustrating part about this debt ceiling bill, though, when you look at it on its face, is that there are going to be some additional eligibility requirements for people who are on SNAP under the age of 54, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. But when you actually look at it, there is a little bit of a kind of, I would say, sophisticated negotiation move that President Biden did here when we talk about SNAP. He actually extended SNAP benefits under this negotiation to homeless individuals as well as veterans. So even though the eligibility requirements may, and again, those details haven't even been fleshed out, but there is a concomitant expansion of the program, which I think allows Kevin McCarthy to say he ended up getting some requirements for SNAP and for some of the other government assistance programs. But in reality, when you have the extension of benefits and how those will be defined, the same people will end up being able to have the same benefits. So I don't really think there was any major give here. And one of the things I think we should reflect upon is the fact that the way President Biden and his negotiators frame these discussions is, look, we know that the MAGA Republicans want to tie raising the debt ceiling with budget negotiations, even though those should be disentangled. You shouldn't use the debt ceiling as leverage to try to extort the country. But in any event, there's going to be budgetary negotiations done anyway. And so I think what President Biden smartly realized here is that that strategy of tying the debt ceiling and raising the debt ceiling with certain budgetary asks actually weakens the hand that Kevin McCarthy is dealt, because he's now no longer dealing with the budgetary negotiations under a normal time frame. By creating an arbitrary deadline, he is now, I think, having less negotiating leverage, in the sense that President Biden can do what he did and what the Democrats did, which is basically say, you shouldn't tie this together, and you're going to cause this economic catastrophe. But then what President Biden did is said, okay, then this is your budget negotiation. Here you go. We're going to have to do this anyway. And because the MAGA Republicans control the House, these same concessions would have to have happened anyway in the budgetary. Like, it's not like this was never going to happen. Like, I want to be clear about that. Biden hasn't conceded something that he wouldn't have had to concede during the budgetary negotiations. It is the same concessions that would have been made, and frankly, I think less concessions than he would have had to make. Let's just go to those talking points, if you will, that Greg Price cited. So if you go into it, here's some top-line spending levels, details on the agreement. The deal does not return funding to fiscal year 2022 and instead keeps non-defense spending roughly flat with current fiscal year 2023. I mean, that's big, folks. That non-defense spending is going to basically be what it was in 2023, which was significantly adjusted higher when the Democrats had control of all three branches of government. So it says roughly flat with current fiscal year 2023 levels in 2024. When factoring in agreed upon appropriation adjustments, the agreed upon levels reflect what the administration had successfully negotiated at the end of last calendar year. That's just what I just said. And the deal follows 2 years of the administration securing substantial increase in key investments as well, such as Title I for CCDBG, Child Care and Development Block Grants, cancer research, and more. The president protected against $130 billion in devastating cuts that would have hurt hardworking families, raised people's costs, and hindered economic growth. There are no budget caps after 2025, only non-enforceable appropriations targets. The agreement fully funds medical care for veterans, including the funding of the PACT Act's Toxic Exposure Fund at the levels included in President Biden's fiscal year 2024 budget. Specific funding levels: $886 billion for defense, a 3% increase, $121 billion for veterans medical care, $637 billion for other non-defense programs, taking into account all agreed upon adjustments, which is virtually equal to 2023. And folks, we would have liked that to have been raised, but let's face it, the fact that MAGA Republicans control the House of Representatives, it wasn't going to anyway. Then we get into Medicaid, SNAP, and TANF cuts. And this is the concessions that had to be made. And just so you know, TANF and what that stands for: temporary assistance for needy families. And this is the stuff that MAGA Republicans ultimately wanted to cut. But watch what President Biden did here. I think it is important. The president fought policies that would have taken away health care and pushed people into poverty. No changes to Medicaid at all. The agreement does not include changes that would have put Medicaid at risk for 21 million Americans. Insisted on SNAP eligibility expansion for veterans, people who are homeless, and others, while also fighting to minimize SNAP cuts and make them temporary. This right here is what I want to focus on, because while there are going to be limitations, it's also going to be expanded. So what's actually going to happen here, in theory, is that it's going to kind of cancel itself out in terms of its negative effect. It goes on to say the agreement phases in and then sunsets SNAP time limits to people up to the age of 54. Which the president fought hard against. But at his insistence, it also includes reforms reducing the number of vulnerable people of all ages subject to SNAP time limits, including veterans and people who are homeless. All these changes will sunset in 2030, giving Congress an opportunity to evaluate the effect of these reforms. Prevented TANF changes that would have jeopardized the ability of states to support vulnerable children. The changes to TANF that would have put cash assistance at risk for nearly 1 million children are not in the agreement the president fought to ensure states can continue to support those families and their children. Going on, it says energy and environment. The agreement codifies in NEPA reforms aimed at boosting the coordination, predictability, and certainty associated with federal agency decision-making. The agreement includes provisions to designate a single lead agency charged with developing a single environmental review according to a clear public timeline. That's not really going to change anything. The agreement does not include any changes to the Inflation Reduction Act, climate and clean energy provisions. When it comes to student debt relief, it says the budget agreement keeps in place the president's plan to provide student debt relief for hardworking borrowers recovering from a once-in-a-generational pandemic. The budget agreement codifies an end to the pause, which the administration had planned to end anyway on September 1st. This is what Lauren Boebert is saying about this deal. Our base didn't volunteer, door knock, and fight so hard to get us the majority for this kind of compromise deal with Joe Biden. Our voters deserve better than this. We work for them. You can count me as a no on this deal. This is what Congressman Bob Good, MAGA Republican, says. I'm hearing the deal is for a $4 trillion increase in the debt limit. If that is true, I don't need to hear anything else. No one claiming to be a conservative could justify a yes vote. Y'all are not conservative. Y'all are MAGA Republicans, extremists. MAGA Republican Chip Roy goes, I do not like the deal as I understand it from the cheerleading so far. I will have more to follow once I see more details. Folks, so what happens next? There will now be a vote that will take place after Memorial Day weekend. The vote will take place likely on Tuesday. What will be interesting to see is how this impacts Kevin McCarthy's speakership. Recall that it will take only one vote of a MAGA Republican to force a no confidence vote to remove Kevin McCarthy. The fact that Kevin McCarthy negotiated a deal where he essentially got nothing of substance was changed really materially in this, and the debt ceiling will be raised. We'll probably be making these MAGA Republicans, when they get back, very angry. Expect to see what we saw when there were those 14 rounds of votes where Kevin McCarthy was not able to prevail and become the speaker. I think you are going to see some serious division within the MAGA Republican Party. And I'll just say this on the side of pro-democracy. Is this deal ideal? No. Do I have problems with this deal? Yes. Alternatively, the same types of concessions, though, would have to have been done, unfortunately, in a few months anyway during budget negotiations, and we would be dealing with the same type of situation. And so I think President Biden actually managed to not have to give that many concessions at all. He removed effectively the ability of MAGA Republicans to try to hold our country hostage again. And ultimately, this goal is to make sure our economy thrives, to make sure we continue building, to make sure we can continue winning. In compromises, in negotiations, in settlements, both sides don't get all they want. But in this deal, I could assure you, President Biden got a lot more that he wanted than the MAGA Republicans do. And you'll be seeing that over the next few days. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit subscribe. We're on our way to 1.5 million subscribers thanks to your awesome support. Check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. And wherever you get audio podcasts, subscribe to the MeidasTouch podcast. All right, hit subscribe on our YouTube channel and have a great day.
Hey Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.